Well, it's time to get updates from the world of business. It's going to be 55 minutes right here on Business Incorporated, and here's what we have prepared for you. In Nigeria, investors are reacting to that number from the NBS. Yesterday, inflation dropped. Tanzania is targeting investment growth with its new tax deal. And in DR Congo, there are plans to impose stricter cobalt exports. You're welcome to the program. I'm Ini John Mekwa. We start the program, as usual, from the global space, as oil prices were a little changed on Friday under increased supply pressure from OPEC Plus output hike and the prospect of Iranian nuclear deal. Yet we're heading for a second consecutive weekly gain because of the easing of U.S.-China trade tensions. So for this afternoon, we see there's been an increase, 9-cent increase on Brent. It's now still 64, had a little bit of cents added right there, and that's a 0.31% increase. Of course, it's 64 for Brent. For Nigeria, we're still looking forward to the $75, which is the target for the 2025 budget. For WTI of the United States, the color has changed. So in the morning we saw a red color, but for now it's back up 0.24% and is now at $61.77 a barrel. We know that President Donald Trump has said that the U.S. was nearing a nuclear deal with Iran, and Tehran sort of agreeing to its term. However, you know, there's been dissenting voices through that, saying that there were still issues to be resolved before concrete agreements can be done on that. Sanctions would ease supply risk and allow Iran to increase oil output and find more willing buyers for its oil. And that could result in additional supply of around 400,000 barrels per day if they have that deal. Well, despite the potential supply pressure, both Brent and WTI are up 0.6% so far this week, and sentiment got a boost after the U.S. and China, you know, they are the two biggest oil consumers and economies. They've agreed to a 90-day pause on their trade war, during which both sides will sharply lower trade duties, and the hefty reciprocal Sino-U.S. tariffs had raised fears of a sharp blow to global growth and oil demand for now. Well, still around the oil, but back here in Nigeria, the Nigerian Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Commission, that's the NUPRC, has reiterated its plan to raise the number of active oil rigs in the country's petroleum sector from the current 36 to 50 by the end of this year. This was made known by the Chief Executive Officer of the NUPRC, Mr. Gbenga Komolafe, at the just concluded 2025 Africa Energy Summit. That was in London, the UK. According to him, the move 88.89% when put in comparison with what we have currently. Mr. Komolafe notes that from 8 oil rigs in 2021, when President Bola Tinubu's recent reforms have significantly removed the bottlenecks and enhanced investment in the country's oil sector. The NUPRC chief also mentioned that Nigeria is set to tap into the projected $600 billion annual upstream investment as required to grow Africa's oil sector, which is estimated to hit about $3 trillion by 2030. Away from oil now, gold prices slipped more than 1% on Friday, and when heading for their worst week in 6 months, as an overall higher dollar and temporary U.S.-China trade agreement dented demand for the safe haven metals among investors. So look at the number for this afternoon. It's almost 1% down for spot gold. So it settles at $3,210.19. U.S. gold is also down 0.4%, $3,213.60. Spot silver more than 1% in the red, 1.2 to be precise, at $32.28. 98 cents. Palladium also down almost 0.5%, is at $985.30, and palladium is 1% down at $958.56. And earlier this week, the US and China agreed on that 90-day pause. And of course, that means there's more confidence in the market and less demand for hedge, which is what gold has turned out to be. Well, offering some respite to gold, signs of slowing inflation, weaker than expected economic data in the United States this week also cemented bets of more Federal Reserve rate cuts this year. Back here in Nigeria, the world's biggest off-grid solar firm, Sun King, has secured an $80 million financing with Stanbic IBTC Bank and the International Finance Corporation to speed up Nigeria's solar electrification access. A statement from the company says the loan, which is its largest local currency facility for energy access in West Africa to date, is expected to help finance the provision of electricity to as many as 4 million households over the next 4 to 5 years, according to the 2 million which it has already funded. The company also mentioned that it expects private investment of more than $1 billion to be attracted and electricity access to be extended to 17.5 million people in the country. Sun King, which is a leading off-grid solar provider, designs, distributes, and finances solar systems across over 40 countries. Small business owners in the country have participated in this year's edition of Pitch Day, an event where companies, particularly startups, present their business ideas and seek investment feedback or partnership from potential investors or even customers. Participants, which include investors and entrepreneurs from various sectors, gathered in Lagos to connect with industry experts as they present realistic projections for growth and profitability.
Pitch Day 2025 is the climax of a year-round educational support to empower businesses and make them profitable. Hundreds of operators of especially small businesses are here to get tips on how to scale up for sustainability and greater impact. And this goes beyond funding.
Supporting profitable companies is our method of creating impact. But our mission is not to make money for ourselves.
What capital tries to do usually is to come in to remove some of those obstacles. So people talk about, oh, let's bring in venture capital and private equity because there is no capital. What Cascado found out was that capital alone wasn't going to do it. It's important that you actually equip the entrepreneurs to succeed.
No farmer, no nation. All right.
Farmers and other players in the agriculture value chain have been given priority, seeing that Nigeria is still seeking to achieve food security.
More than half of the inputs sold in raw markets today are fake, cutting yields by more than 40%. Our direct access to inputs from manufacturers fixes that and has already raised buying farmers' income by 70%. Now, farmers in Nigeria spend a lot on agricultural inputs. $3 billion annually. In the next 5 years, we will capture $30 million of this market and become the largest single point of access to all inputs.
At least 39 million micro, small and medium enterprises operated in Nigeria as of December 2020, as against 41.5 million that were the year before. Reports indicate that SMEs contribute 48% to national GDP and account for 96% of businesses and 84% of employment. Unfortunately, though, research also shows that over 50% of SMEs fail in their first year of operation. This calls for urgent actions such as this to empower entrepreneurs in the ecosystem.
The National Information Technology Development Agency, NITDA, says it plans to set up at least 1,600 ICT centres across the country in the next few years, and that's part of its efforts to drive digital inclusion. The Director General of NITDA, Mr. Kashifo Inuwa, who made this known during the commissioning of a community ICT centre facility in Lagos, says that the agency has established a total of 222 ICT facilities in the last 2 years. According to him, 18 community centres have been built so far, while 3 ICT hubs have been established.
The major challenges is even getting the communities to own it. Like in this community, the Song community here in Lagos, they are fantastic. We had a woman that donated the land. We have the community leadership, the elders, they are all part of it. Because what we want to build a sustainability model around. We don't want government to build center and every time when there is a small thing, government has to come to fix it. We want the community to take ownership. We want the community to talk to the youth in the community, to train our people, and also find a way the center is sustainable. Yes, it's a huge task, but NIDA is an agency, it's a developmental agency. We have a development fund, which is there for us to help develop IT and promote use of IT across the country.
Odua Investment Company Limited has announced a dividend payout of 518 million naira to its shareholders for the 2024 financial year, representing a 21% increase over the 428 million naira declared in 2023. The announcement was made by the group chairman, Mr. Bimbo Ashiru, alongside other financial results, including a revenue growth of 7.15 billion naira during the company's 43rd annual general meeting in Lagos. Mr. Ashiru describes the overall performance as a testament to the company's resilience in a challenging business environment.
At this juncture, I want to inform you.
As the custodians of the investment hub for the Southwest states, the board of Odua Investment Company performs its core obligation, presenting the group's annual reports and financial statements to the shareholder states represented at the 43rd annual general meeting.
Odua Company Limited operating revenue grew.
On behalf of the board, the chairman, Mr. Bimbo Ashiru, highlights what he believes is an exceptional performance at the end of 2024.
As a company, we navigated this challenging economic environment and delivered a positive result and demonstrates the resilience of organization.
The chairman's position is supported by a graphic representation of key indicators of the company's financial performance, including revenue growth, operating profits, total comprehensive income, and the value of its financial assets.
At the last meeting held by the Governors Forum, they specifically said that they are happy and they are proud with what is happening in Odua. We are making them proud. It is not the issue of dividend alone. It is how consistently we are moving the target, and which is very important.
In terms of profit itself that was reported for this year, look at the line called operating profit, and that is more than doubled. Yes, so we're fine, and we're looking forward here.
In another segment of the AGM, shareholders and guests witnessed the signing of MOUs to seal a 10 billion naira joint venture between SWATCO, the agribusiness subsidiary of Odua Investment Company, and its strategic partners. This partnership will facilitate the development of a cocoa plantation at the Odua Agro-Industrial Hub in Ekiti or Ondo State, a maize production project in Ekiti State, and an integrated maize, soybeans, sorghum, and beef production initiative in Ogun State.
We are in Ekiti now, we are in Odo, we are in Ogun. Lagos State, we are doing the paddy rights with them, through SWACO. Oshun, we are there. We are even going to reactivate the academy, the farm academy in Oshun. So those are the things that we are working on. So with that, we are focused, and we believe that we are going to contribute our own quota to the economy of this country in a more progressive way.
And with this, we'll be able to collaborate with each other, and the Southwest States are ready to continue to give them the necessary support so that the company will continue to grow from strength to strength.
The various projects are expected to enhance food security, create thousands of direct and indirect jobs, and boost local economies in the Southwest.
Well, talking about doing business, the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry is concerned about the issue of insecurity, which they say is disrupting investors' sentiment and decision to elaborately invest in Nigeria.
It's the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry Security Meets Business Forum, where the focus is the reality that affects the intersection of security and economic prosperity, with highlights on the challenges faced in charting strategic course towards a safer, more resilient Nigeria.
Security is not merely a law enforcement matter. It is an economic imperative. In Abuja, for example, business revenues declined by 33% between January 2023 and January 24. That was 1 year due to rising insecurity.
The most important agencies empowered to regulate security are here to give assurances to investors and potential ones.
Have impact on the country's economy, where investors, whether local or foreign, have confidence in our efforts to be able to ensure the security and stability of our country.
Our strategic action, our intelligence unit, which include the Force Intelligence Department, the State Criminal Intelligence Department, and other departments, response team work around the clock to monitor criminal trends that may threaten investment security in the country.
The 2025 Global Terrorism Index ranks Nigeria 6th globally, up from 8th place in the preceding 2 years, with a score of 7.658. In 2024 alone, Nigeria recorded 565 terrorism-related deaths, a stark reminder of the ongoing national security crisis and real threats to Nigeria's business climate.
Now let's take our minds back to those numbers, the inflation numbers that came from the NBS yesterday, and see how investors in the market in Nigeria are reacting to that. We have Kola Komolafe, is a currency dealer with Access Bank, to speak with us on this. Hi, Kola, good afternoon and welcome to the program. What has been the reaction to that drop in inflation from the release of the NBS?
Yeah, hi, good afternoon. Thank you for having me. So it's been rather received positively, right? Because it shows that the efforts of the central bank, rates have been quite elevated. That's a hawkish stance from the central bank. So it just shows that it's yielding fruits, which is why we saw that decline by 52 basis points. So it's been rather received positively. Now it's to watch and see how that would affect the decisions at the MPC meeting, which is scheduled to hold next week on 19th and 20th of May next week. But market has largely received it positively because it just shows that we are heading in the right direction. If you recall, or as you're aware, one of the major drives is to bring down inflation, and where it printed out in March at 24.23 was what took market by surprise. But now that it's trending downward across that, the core inflation, the food inflation also down, it's certainly good news.
Okay, when you say they're responding positively, how has it increased demands for securities, or how have they shown this positive response?
Okay, so it's still quite early for you to see how it would impact the market in terms of numbers. The major consideration would be what the MPC decides to do with rates at its meeting next week. Would they hold rates? Would they say, okay, it's time to now start easing rates a bit, or would they increase it? So it just really depends on what the MPC does. I expect, or I think that rates are still going to be held still, because I don't think they were out of the woods just yet. So I would expect that maybe rates will be kept constant. But it's for us to watch and see what the MPC decides to do next week, which would largely then determine the tone of the market going forward.
Yeah, and of course, the decision of the MPC affects consequently yields. And we've seen yields, well, not as attractive as it was in the first quarter, but what are your expectations, assuming it's a hold? Because, I mean, you're not the first who is expecting a hold decision from the MPC. What could happen if it's a hold decision next week?
Okay, if it's a hold, we'll probably maybe see, so just after the decision of the MPC will be announced on Tuesday. On Wednesday, we have an NTB auction, which would largely sort of be like a transfer mechanism, right, on whatever rates do. Rates, you're right, they've not been as elevated as we used to. The last top rate for the NTB, the 1 year closed at 19.63. Maybe gone are the days where we'll see it touching 20% again. But if rates are held constant, then we can expect that rates will still continue to close at the NTB auction around that rate. We've seen that typically the 91 and 182 closed at 18 and 18.5, while I'd mentioned before that the 364-day closed at 19.60. So if rates are kept constant at these levels, then we can expect that rates in the fixed income market would still continue to play around that rate or that range.
Okay, so what group of investors are the larger players at this time? Is it the domestic or the foreign at this time?
Okay, well, what we've seen really is this week we've seen more interest from the FPIs, and that's basically because they like to play in with the automobiles, right? And the yields in the automobile space is still quite elevated when you compare it to the NTB market. So that's what we've seen the FPIs play. The NTB market, we still continue to see retail investors and local corporate investors in that space. But this week, by and large, we've seen FPIs play in the Obomo market, and I've mentioned why that is the case, just because of the yield pickup that they see compared to NTB and other fixed income securities available.
All right, I mean, you're a big player in the currency space. What's happening at this time? We saw a bit of a drop on the value of the Naira. Should we say our new level now is 1,600?
If recent events anything to go by, we've seen that it has sort of found its level for now at around the 1,600 levels. The market players, both offshore and also local players, continue to trade around those levels. This week we've seen yesterday the central bank has participated as a willing seller to market players. They've also come in today to sell to the market just to sort of spur supply, because we continue to see significant demand way above the supply that we have. So we've seen the CBN coming to try and stabilize rates when it seems like, of course, the law of economics, the more demand you have, then you see that we're seeing that the currency just depreciates slightly, but when supply is then put into the market, it sort of stabilized things. So we've seen it close around the 1,599 to 1,600 levels, and we expect that would continue going into the new week.
And the BDCs, I know that the CBN shared a circular some time ago, I think over a month ago, to say, well, they will also be getting supplies. How's that going, the CBN and the BDCs?
That has been, so if you know what they did with the BDCs was to sort of tidy up that space, right? Put tighter regulations in place, and then we still continue to see them supply to the market, BDCs and local players that are in the market, just acting as a willing seller to willing buyers at rates that are comfortable and market reflective. Right, so all those mechanisms are still in place, also ensuring the transparency that we came to see with the B-match system, which sort of spurred that. So with more transparency, you saw market players now, there was more price discovery, right? So we still continue to see that the FX market is more robust, getting more robust by the day, with the governance guidelines that the CBN still continues to monitor very, very closely while they intervene as and when necessary to sort of support the supply side.
So what's the expectation for the rest of the month? We're half of the month now. We see the Naira at about 159, as you said, about 1.6. Do we see that continuing? Do we know what could pressure it to go lower than that, which is what we don't hope for anyway?
So without having a crystal ball, right? One of the things that might test those levels would be the action of the FPIs, right? As we have more maturities, right? If you have more, if you have sort of like an exit of those FPIs, it could put pressure on the dollars, on the exchange rates as a demand for dollars. But if anything is to go by, every time we've seen those events happen, right, rates have held steady at those levels. It just depends on what level of supply is it that we have, and market players are more willing to exchange currencies. And I've also mentioned that you also see the CBN also active in that space, where just to keep just to maintain price stability, right? So I don't expect that would have any. I don't expect that will have any significant depreciation. I think rates will still remain at these levels. The market is getting by the day getting more and more confident in our exchange, in our foreign exchange market, and I expect that would continue as we close the month. But next week is a big one. I'd mentioned the MPC because market players are watching to see what would happen there, because that would set the tone for a lot of other things that would follow, both in the fixed income and the foreign exchange market.
All right, so just keep our fingers crossed and see what happens by the end of next week. Thank you so much, Kola Komolafe, currency dealer with Access Bank.
Thank you for having me.
All right, now let's look at other markets. At this time, the stock market mostly, that was talking about the fixed income market. So we see for Nigeria's stock market, at intraday, the market is green, 0.05%, sustaining the 109,000 level. I wonder if we can cross over, by the close of trade. I think that would be a record high if we get to 110, or we've been there before. Well, let's see what happens at the close of trade. For Johannesburg, it's retaining its 92,000 level after gaining 0.15%. Looking at other markets, Egypt, we know, is closed for today. So for Thursday, it closed positive, 31,941.15, and Nairobi's Thursday's close looks really good, and I see in my absence it's gone to 133. That's beautiful for this market. Been crawling around 125 for a while, so it's good to see new numbers right there in that market. Let's go to the Middle East, and we see intraday Dubai and Abu Dhabi. The other two markets do not trade today. Friday. So it's 0.71 in the green for Dubai at 5,436.85, while Abu Dhabi is 0.19, also positive, 9,643.45. The other two markets, they're closed for Thursday, is a red and a green. The Tadawul closed in the red, while Qatar closed almost unchanged, but I guess just a little bit changed in the green for that. We head to the United States now and see what's happening in, well, that almighty market, stock futures. We see for Dow Jones is in the red for the futures, 42,517 after it dropped 0.31%. S&P is also red, as well as NASDAQ at this time. But let's see how Thursday's trade closed with our correspondent, Maria Bird.
The U.S. stock market fluctuated on Thursday as investors were watching to see what would happen with Walmart as they weighed the tariff-clouded announcements related to earnings and retail sales. This is a clue toward the health of the U.S. economy. As the Dow Jones was up at 0.6%, the S&P 500 also up at 0.4%, and the heavy tech NASDAQ snapped a 6-day winning streak, falling at 0.2%.
Many investors wanted to see what this will mean for the next few days and weeks ahead for the U.S. economy.
Well, let's leave the U.S. and go to Asia, where markets were mixed on Friday's. Investors passed Japan's latest gross domestic product figures. You know, it was a contract and await a slate of other economic data from the region. For the Nikkei, almost unchanged, but in the red, 37,753.7 to the Kospi of South Korea is recovered 0.21%. At 2,626. Hang Seng is in the red, but guess what? It's still the same rate, you know, just the color is different. So the Hang Seng lost 0.21% at 22,345.05. Look at other markets in that region. Shanghai is in the red as well as Nifty 50. India is back in the red, we see. So mostly red, mixed, but mostly red for them. And I think it follows those data, GDP from Japan, that shows a contraction in the economy for the last month. Those other data is expected. I guess that will give more clarity on what's happening. We should look at the Europe markets now and see what's going on right there. But I think we should take a break. When we come back, Emily will tell us what's happening with Europe and the investor sentiment around there. So let's take a break. We'll be back here on Business Incorporated.
We live in an era of massive innovation, true ideas that
Welcome back. It's still Business Incorporated here on Channels Television. Picking up where we dropped off before the break with the markets. Now we're going to Europe to see what's happening with the market there. Emily Leshner joins us from Deutsche Welle. Hi, Emily. Good afternoon. What's going on with investors this afternoon?
Hi. Yes, they've all made gains after opening today. So the week seems to be ending on a good note for investors. Stocks opened higher today on the FTSE 100 in London. That's continuing a winning streak that's rooted in the major trade deal that was reached between the U.S. and China. The gain also comes ahead of European Defence Pact talks that are taking place next week. And the British pound made a slight gain against the dollar. Then there's American Axle, a U.S. auto parts manufacturer currently listed on the New York Stock Exchange. They've announced plans for a secondary listing in London after acquiring the British Dowlais Group. The CAC 40 in Paris and the DAX in Frankfurt were also up. That means that for the DAX, it's heading for its fifth consecutive week in positive trading.
So, Emily, we've heard of whether it's a temporal compromise in the relationship between the U.S. and China for 90 days. And I wonder if talks of such is going on with Europe, between U.S. and Europe.
There might be in the future. The White House sent a letter to the European Commission saying that it's willing to negotiate. That's the first real sign that the Trump administration has made towards curbing the trade war with Europe. But reaching an agreement with the U.S. may prove more difficult for Europe. The bloc is made up of 27 member states, which need to agree on the deal. The EU also has a major trade surplus with the U.S., totaling more than 150 billion euro. So that makes negotiations more complex. But at the end of the day, the EU wants good trade relations with the US, even if that takes a different form under the Trump administration than it did in previous US administrations. And that's exactly why Brussels has offered a list of concessions that it's willing to make in exchange for zero tariffs on industrial goods for both sides. And that list includes increasing imports of certain products and services like US liquefied natural gas and advanced AI technology, as well as a variety of agricultural products. What's not clear, though, at the moment is if Trump thinks that these concessions are enough. I mean, in the past couple of weeks, we've seen that the White House was able to reach a temporary agreement with China and a deal with the UK. So though it may be more complicated and take more time, there is some hope in Brussels that a deal can be reached, though probably not in the next couple of weeks, as Trump has suggested. It's likely to take much longer than that.
Yeah, so what could happen if this deal doesn't pull through, if President Trump thinks what Europe is offering is not good enough? What's at stake?
Yeah, there's a lot at stake here, and that's a 1.6 trillion euro trade relationship. If a deal isn't reached, we're going to see more tariffs on both sides. It's going to impact consumers and companies. EU goods entering the U.S. will be hit with a 20% levy. That's going to kick in July if negotiations aren't made. And in retaliation, Brussels has said it'll impose new tariffs on about 95 billion euro worth of U.S. goods on things like cars, medical devices, aircraft. And it's also considering curbing the export of steel and chemicals, which are very important to the U.S. market. More than 40% of U.S. service exports go to Europe. So economists say that the U.S. can't afford to lose the European market. There's just too much at stake here.
All right, we'll see what happens at the end of the day. Emily, thank you so much for the information. All right, now let's move away from Europe and head to South Africa, where the president, Cyril Ramaphosa, is set to meet with U.S. President Donald Trump. This is a meeting we've been looking forward to. So finally, we know it's supposed to be next week. And it's all in an effort to touch on key areas of agreement between the two nations, particularly around trade. Speaking on the sidelines of the 100 Most Reputable Africans event last night, Dr. Sindiswa Mazamo, the president of the Circle of Global Business Women, expressed her support for the upcoming talks, emphasizing the importance of strengthening bilateral ties in ways that benefit both countries.
I'm really excited about the first meeting between President Trump and President Ramaphosa, because this meeting would actually set the bar high as we're actually preparing for the G20. In my other life, I actually serve as the co-chair of financial inclusion and entrepreneurship within G20, responsible for W20. So now as women, we want our country presidents to come together and build peace as we build the Africa that we want, but also building a better world, a better Africa, a better South Africa, a better America.
Yeah, everyone wants to meet with President Trump. We haven't heard of our president. I guess we do not have a whole lot to lose. So it's our place. Now, the Democratic Republic of Congo, the world's largest cobalt producer, is considering imposing stringent export curbs on the metal after its current 4-month export ban concludes. The DRC temporarily suspended cobalt export for at least 4 months in February 2025. That was in response to an oversupply in the market. The Authority for the Regulation and Control of Strategic Mineral Substances Markets, the president of that group, Patrick Lubabeya, announced that the potential restrictions at a conference in Singapore, citing high domestic and global stockpiles that have suppressed prices. Cobalt demand, excluding government stockpiling, is projected to grow at a compound annual growth rate of 7%, reaching 400,000 tons by early 2030s, and primarily driven by the expansion of electric vehicle markets. The government of Tanzania has signed an agreement to avoid double taxation with the Czech Republic in a strategic move to boost foreign direct investment and strengthen economic cooperation between the two countries. Trade between the two nations has grown steadily since 2022, particularly in the services, machinery, electrical equipment, transport, and technology sectors. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development says countries with comprehensive double taxation agreements attract up to 30% more FDI than those without such treaties. Tanzania is currently ranked among the top 3 investment destinations on the continent, alongside South Africa and Nigeria, with economic growth projected to average 6% by the end of 2025. The National Bank of Ethiopia has announced that government borrowing has decreased to 0 this year. And this announcement was made by the governor of the National Bank of Ethiopia, Mamo Meretu. The governor acknowledges that Ethiopia's financial sector has been facing numerous challenges, including inflation and foreign exchange shortages. It states that Ethiopia has embarked on comprehensive macroeconomic reforms to address these issues. He indicates that these reforms are aimed at increasing the inclusiveness and competitiveness of Ethiopia's financial sector, resolving foreign exchange shortages, attracting foreign trade and foreign direct investment, and also controlling inflation. And in Kenya, the country has successfully returned to the international capital market, raising $1.5 billion. That's about 194 billion shillings through a new Eurobond targeted at debt restructuring. The issuance, managed by Citi and Standard Bank as joint lead managers, marks a new chapter in the government's ongoing strategy to proactively manage public debt. As part of the deal, Kenya also executed a $579 million, that's about 74.89 billion shillings, buyback of its 2027 Eurobond, and that's easing pressure on its medium-term debt obligations. The Treasury officials described the deal as a clear vote of confidence from the international investors, citing the 64% participation rate in the tender offer and the ability to upsize the issuance as indicators of Kenya's renewed credibility in global markets. And Zimbabwe's trade deficit worsened in the first quarter of this year, 2025, with imports surging by nearly 7%, while exports grew by a marginal 1.5%. This is according to data released by the Zimbabwe National Statistics Agency. The country's trade deficits, the gap between imports and exports, ballooned to $543 million between January and March, and that's up from $424 million in the same period of last year, marking a 28% increase. Zimbabwe's import bill rose to $2.29 billion, driven largely by fuel, electricity, and essential manufactured goods. South Africa remained the largest source of imports, followed by China, the Bahamas, Mozambique, and the United Arab Emirates. The country continues to rely heavily on mineral exports, with gold and other raw materials making up the bulk of shipments to the UAE, China, and South Africa. Let's do crypto now and see what's happening. So we see crypto has recovered, fluctuating between 104,000 and 103,000. For this afternoon, it's 103,699.79 after it gained 0.85% in the last 24 hours. So looking comfortable compared to, some weeks ago. Ethereum is 2,607. Also went up more than 1%. For the others, I guess, Cardano, TRX, and all, they follow, but we still have a bit of red, a handful of it at this time. But let's find out what our guests think about this at this time. We do have, of course, some headlines that we're supposed to follow up, some news that's making. Let's get into that so we can get his opinion on all of the issues. So we start with the very first one is Coinbase facing up to $400 million hits from cyber attack. So once again, we're talking about cyber attack in the crypto space, and it's one of the world's biggest cryptocurrency firm, that's Coinbase. They say that a recent cyber attack will cost up to $400 million. That's investors' fund. The firm says it was contacted by hackers who claim to have gained access to customer information obtained by making payments to Coinbase contractors and employees. They said this in a blog post. They said that criminals have gained access to less than 1% of their customer data. Well, that's risky, of course, which they then use to impersonate the firm and trick people. So perhaps you were not talking to Coinbase, even though you thought you were talking to. The group then demanded $20 million from Coinbase to keep it quiet. But it says it refused to pay the bribe and instead promised to pay back every person who got scammed. That's from Coinbase. The risk of cyber attack there looking even more real. And then we see in Brazil's fintech company, Meluz, has become the first in the country to include Bitcoin in its treasury, buying more than 28.4 million in Bitcoin. That's a huge demand on Bitcoin. And that's, I guess, could keep that green color going for a bit. The move marks a shift in the firm's financial strategy, with the company now focusing on increasing its Bitcoin holdings through corporate structures and capital management. The company confirmed that the bank is using this strategy not just to deal with inflation and currency risks, but because it's now one of its main ways of doing business. Do we see a day when Bitcoin becomes a hedge, just like gold, or competing with gold? We'll see. Now, SWIFT has confirmed that Wells Fargo and many banks are having interest in using Ripple, XRP. So it's not just Bitcoin that seems to be getting attention. In a recent tweet, they said between a recent crypto enthusiast known as Shane and a researcher named as Smoke, it drew attention to two separate mentions of blockchain-related technologies on SWIFT's website. Of course, you know SWIFT, you know, the platform that's used for international transactions. Well, so this was a conversation that shows that banks may be taking interest in not just Bitcoin, but also in XRP. Then blockchain gaming hits 2025 low as daily users numbers slide. That's also another story. Blockchain gaming, so user activity declined sharply in April, dipping below 5 million daily active wallets for the first time this year, and daily active users in blockchain gaming declined by 10% in April 2025, dropping to 4.8. Now let's find out what Solomon Amunde thinks about all of this. Hi, Solomon. Good afternoon and welcome to the program. Hello, Solomon.
Good afternoon.
Can you hear me? Okay, great.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, great. So, how soon do you think that Bitcoin or cryptocurrency generally can be a competition with gold, when investors are looking for a hedge against inflation and those macroeconomic headwinds?
I think right now it's already competing with gold. As of now, the only challenge investors have is Bitcoin's stability. Gold seems to be more stable, whereas Bitcoin gives more return on investment and is actually way more volatile than gold. But looking at long-term projections, definitely Bitcoin would give investors more return than gold. So I think right now, Bitcoin is already proving itself a strong competitor with gold. The only difference is, gold still has a huge market capitalization compared to Bitcoin as of now. I think it's still 10 times higher in terms of market capitalization compared to Bitcoin, which also shows...
Yeah, but Solomon, even from what you've said, don't you think that when investors are looking for a hedge, they'll still go to gold? When they are looking for investments with returns, when you also look at the volatility, which you mentioned, that's when they'll look for Bitcoin. When they're looking for a hedge, they just want to shield against those headwinds.
Yeah. For now, most investors, they would want to hedge with gold. But for the few investors that have a deeper understanding of Bitcoin and its future, and knowing very well that it's just starting, the future of Bitcoin is just starting, we're still at the foundational point, those investors would want to risk it with Bitcoin. I mean, right now we can see different countries and hedge funds moving funds to Bitcoin. We also saw Abu Dhabi too. One of their funds, they also invested in Bitcoin recently, over $400 million. So there are stuffs that these people have seen, and they know that this is the best time to position themselves, obviously.
Yeah, but when you also see stories like the one from Coinbase, cyber attack and hacks, I mean, look at $400 million. That's a lot of money. And that could also scare, businesses and institutional investors who want to take a hedge there.
The truth of the matter is these investors, they know that these hacks also happen in traditional finance. The only difference is we don't see it in the news in traditional finance, but in blockchain, you can't hide it because everyone has access to the open ledger and anyone can see that hack without waiting for the media to tell us that something like that happened or waiting for the platform to air the news. So that's why most times we have these stuffs happening or looks like they're happening all the time and the blockchain space, lots of hacks and all, is because whenever the funds are moving on chain, people know. So if Binance, for example, is hacked today, before Binance even knows that they are hacked, a random person can know about it. If Coinbase is hacked today, it's a similar thing. They can see the funds moving on chain. So that's why it's looking like it's not safe. But it doesn't mean these same things don't happen in traditional finance. The difference is we can't know when it happens in traditional finance unless the banks or the companies involved tells us.
Yeah, except it gets as big as what we had in CBEX, which was all over the news, I guess.
Yep.
All right, when we look at the scene in Nigeria, we see a lot of institutional investors now adopting. We see the government becoming more friendly to the cryptocurrency space. I guess Nigeria is also following suit. We are not being left out of this trend.
Well, we hope to not be left out from this whole trend, but from the government, we haven't really seen much. We haven't seen efforts from the government. We have not seen commitment from the government, financial commitment. We haven't seen that. As little as a commitment as little as Nigeria spends $50 million to buy Bitcoin or to create a Bitcoin reserve fund, we have not seen any form of commitment to show that, yes, the government has skin in this game. But yeah, we see some stuff relating to taxing. The government would tax crypto traders and stuff like that. That's what we see. But we have not seen support. We have not really seen that support.
Now, but don't you think that the ISA, as a form of regulating, is also a form of commitment, that would win confidence, not just from the government, but also from potential investors?
Yeah, but I do believe that before you start trying to tax so much, you should try to also support the growth of the ecosystem, especially when it is still very, very young. You should try to give them the most support. If possible, even give them tax waivers for the next 3-4 years. That's also a huge support. But we haven't seen that from the government. Like, we haven't, basically. We've seen some frameworks that they've come up with to help regulate the space and things like that. Or some other deep financial commitments, we haven't seen it yet.
All right, well, we do hope to see it soon. But do you see stability now with the price of Bitcoin? It's been around 103, 104 for a couple of days now. Do you think that's where we'll be for a bit, or do you see a movement soon?
Well, actually, I expect Bitcoin to dump to at least $98,000, just so that we can get the desired traction we need and momentum for us to create a new all-time high. It will be quite impressive if we don't go above $100,000 again, but I'm not so certain that I would see that happen. I still believe we might still just go a bit below $100,000 before making new all-time high. But generally, I strongly believe that this year, Bitcoin will make a new all-time high.
Okay, all right. We'll see how that goes. Solomon Amunde, thank you so much for your time and your views.
Thank you very much, Ini.
So that's it on the program. Thank you so much for being a part of Business Incorporated today. Well, Ladi has been busy all through. Well, it's good to be the one to close out for the week. But do remember, on our YouTube channel, you can watch our programs, Business Morning, Business Incorporated, whenever you want to relive that experience. I'm John McQuarrie. I'll see you tonight for the Stock Market Report. Bye-bye.